Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 18th of December, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the currency situation. We can see euro and pound is up, but we're also seeing markets very heavily down again. So, first of all, dollar index we see is just flagging a little bit. Might be just trying to get through this long-term resistance level, but still a pretty bullish picture for the dollar. And we look at the euro. The euro's ticking up on that slightly weaker dollar short term, but still looks pretty vulnerable. Looking at the yen, dollar sinking much lower here. Yen is a safe haven, of course, when we see markets in turmoil. So there is a bit of a flight to the yen at the moment, which the dollar is also considered a fairly safe haven. But we're also waiting for the Fed announcement tomorrow, so I think markets are just a bit jittery ahead of that. Sterling is ticking up against that weaker dollar. Against the euro, it's fairly flat, and against the Swiss franc, also fairly flat. Looking against the Aussie dollar, sterling looking a little bit stronger. Bitcoin down a further 1.3%, so we are seeing it down this morning, but it did have quite a good run yesterday, but we are really struggling in this $3,000 area. The S&P 500 index was down 2%. That's leading to 14-month lows, levels not seen since summer last year. So really now quite a concern, and so the new lows are bad, of course, for the market. Looking at the Nasdaq, we're seeing similar. We've got downside targets of 7%, 15%, and 15%. So it really does look like stocks have got further to fall. For anyone who's thinking about bargain hunting right now. Looking at the Dow Jones index, pretty clear fall here as well. Markets really just struggling, and again downside targets, so not looking great. The Russell 2000, the broader based index, also hitting new lows there as well. The futures are up slightly today. We're seeing the S&P future up 0.13%, the Nasdaq E-mini up 0.1%, so nothing spectacular. Those markets could still open down. In the UK, the FTSE is down now 0.75%. Not making new lows quite the way the US market has been, but of course it has been lower, and we are bearish longer term on these charts in a way that the US isn't. So the UK market still looks pretty bad, and the mid caps in the UK are sinking to new lows, so performing worse there. We've got further downside targets here of 1.7%, 1.98%, so let's say 2% downside potential. The DAX is down down 0.35%, and so we're seeing a slight change there. And the CAC 40 is also down. Looking at Japan, we're down 1.9% overnight, so Asian markets falling quite heavily. Hang Seng down 1%, China down just under 1%, so again just sinking lower. The Indian market down 1/3%, and the Aussie market down 1.2%. So we're just seeing lots of downside targets. Brent crude is down 1.75% this morning on that reduced sentiment, and WTI looking quite worrying, down 1.8%, and really this long-term chart starting to look quite bearish for crude, activating a very, very big downside target to $22. Don't get too excited about that though, because we've still got these intermediate targets of $48 and $44, and of course we are heading into the next quarter, which is normally the strong quarter for crude. US nat gas is up 2%, recovering a little bit after a big falls over the last several days. And we're seeing other commodities like heating oil falling to new lows as well. Gold is bucking the trend. Of course, gold being a safe haven. That's back to bullish, $1,248. So looking pretty bullish there. Silver, not quite as bullish as gold, but still moving above the cloud. US 10-year yields at 2.84%. Markets nervously waiting for the Federal Reserve announcement tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. All of this data coming to you from Thomson Reuters Icon, or if you're using Metastock as a private user, the same system. And here we see weekly, daily, and 60 minutes as my long, medium, and short term. Moving to the stocks, we take a look at world indices. We see here this data all coming from Yahoo Finance. We see here we have quite a lot of red on the screen. So we saw Nasdaq down 2.2%, for example. Seeing the European markets ticking in here, and we're down fairly significantly here this morning as well. And all the Asian markets all down. So markets not looking at all good. Taking a look at some of the bellwethers in tech last night, we had Amazon down 4.5%, Apple down 1%. And if we look, we had Alphabet down 2.5%. Some quite big falls here. Facebook down a further 2.7%. Their woes certainly not over. And if we look at some of the others, Microsoft down 3%. Uh, 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 Microsoft having been fairly resilient now starting to fall as well. Netflix down 1.5%. Tesla down 4.7%. So we've seen some really big falls across the board there. In the Aussie market, there were a handful of stocks up. CSR Limited was up 4.8%, but on the whole, most stocks were pretty heavily down. Main Pharma down 6.4%, Worley Parsons down 6.2%. Really big numbers here. We're seeing big falls away and seeing the relative charts here. Any stock that was well ahead of the Dow Jones Index and relative now underwater. So we're really seeing some quite big changes. In China, we had just 5 stocks up, so quite big falls there. In Hong Kong, again, just a handful of stocks up. And some very big falls on the market as well. Lots of stocks down 4%, you see across the board there. The Nifty 50 in India, a little bit better picture. India proving to be a little bit more resilient. Sun Pharmaceutical, terrible chart, but they were up, and we are seeing some quite interesting moves here. Oil stocks, for example, but again on the downside, 8% down for Z Entertainment, UPL 3% down. So still seeing quite big falls there. Again, this data all coming in from Yahoo Finance. So we're seeing the weekly, the daily charts here, and then looking at the Nikkei and Tokyo, again, only a handful of stocks up, most stocks down. Takeda down 9%, for example. So some really big falls, terrible looking charts. It's hard to see a bottom here, the relative just clicking down. Taking a look in Europe, we start by looking at the FTSE 100 stocks. So just ranking them by performance. We are seeing some stocks up. Fresnillo up 1.7%. Tesco's up 1.5%. Kingfisher, after yesterday's big falls in retail, up a little bit, but terrible looking chart. Downside targets here, 17% downside on that medium-term target. So we really are seeing some quite big falls. But relief rallies for some of them, M&S, resource stocks tending to do quite well. On the other side of the coin, we've got Shire down 3.8%, National Grid down 3.7%, Scottish Mortgage Investment, NMC Healthcare down 2%. So quite a lot of big falls there. Taking a look at the 250, we've got Vivo Energy 4% up, so there are some rises here. CLS Holdings up 3.4%. But if we go the other way, we've got some very big falls. Oil companies, Tullow and Premier, the smaller line oil companies, looking very similar looking chart to the oil price here, just moving lower. Tullow Oil also lower, so we are seeing some quite big falls there. Cairn Energy, so we're seeing that's a theme really for a lot of these energy stocks. Looking at the Euro Stock 600, we've got Zalando in Germany, they're up 5%, so that's a bucking the trend. But we also see that we are still bearish, very bearish below the cloud. And if we look at the other end of the scale, we've got Acre in Oslo down 5%. We're seeing Loop down 4%, Subsea down 4%. Lots of these stocks really very clearly in downtrends. It's very hard to be positive about the charts at the moment. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.